West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire.
Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. We have new revelations tonight about the ex-president's coup plotting that contains some of the most incriminating evidence yet, and I'll explain. So in the weeks following the election, with his defeat appearing more and more certain, Donald Trump's schemes to stay in power became, as we have chronicled on this show, increasingly desperate. And Trump's personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, had been spreading all kinds of conspiratorial nonsense about the voting machines for weeks, falsely claiming that Dominion voting machines rigged the election for Biden.
It's way beyond what people think, including a very, very dangerous foreign company that did the votes in 27 states, a company that's not American, a company that's foreign, a company that has close ties with Venezuela and therefore China, and uses Venezuelan company software that's been used to steal elections in other countries. I mean, I don't think people have any idea of the dimension of the national security problem that Dominion creates. This Dominion company is a radical left company. One of the people there is a big supporter of Antifa.
Okay, just to be clear, that's just utterly false, like essentially invented out of whole cloth. It's so false that Giuliani got sued by Dominion for billions of dollars for defamation. That suit's ongoing. But the voting machines, the idea that like inside the black box there was some, magical foreign subversion code that was switching votes, that was something that Giuliani was not letting go of. We know this because shortly after the election back in December 2020, the Times reported that Giuliani reached out to Ken Cuccinelli, the acting deputy secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, about seizing possession of voting machines as part of a push to overturn the results of the election. And Cuccinelli is said to have told Giuliani there is no authority by which the agency, Department of Homeland Security, could assert control over voting machines in those states. At the time, the New York Times reported that it was unclear whether Trump facilitated the phone call. Well, over a year later, we know the answer. As a new report in the New York Times details, 6 weeks after Election Day, Trump wanted the Department of Homeland Security to seize the voting machines. According to the paper, quote, Trump directed his lawyer, Rudolph Giuliani, to make a remarkable call. Trump wanted Giuliani to ask the Department of Homeland Security if it could legally take control of voting machines in key swing states. Okay, just step back and think about this, because there's something important in all this. So Donald Trump is president of the United States. Donald Trump is a question for a federal agency about a matter of law. One he, as the chief executive of the country, is in charge of, right? I mean, the Department of Homeland Security reports to him. He's the president. But he didn't want to make the call himself. His weird spidey sense about what might be over the line in terms of criminal liability appears to have kicked in. Organized crime, there's a concept called a bagman, right? That's the errand boy, someone who runs the money so the big boss can keep his hands clean. And Trump appears to have realized that he needed a fall guy to do his dirty work for him. So he turned to Rudy Giuliani, the same bagman he used in Ukraine, the guy who got him impeached the first time while he was trying to dig up dirt on the Bidens. This little detail to me is profoundly revealing. Why doesn't the president call the guy at DHS? Why doesn't he go through normal liaisons at the White House? Because he knows it's wrong. He's got to get his dirty trickster to do it, because it is evidence of guilty conscience and corrupt intent. If the president, ex-president, thought what he was doing was legit, he could have called up DHS himself. He's the president. But he knew. Seizing the voting machines was lawless, possibly criminal, something he had no authority to do, and so he sent Rudy. Go find out if you can take care of that. His personal lawyer to do the dirty work for him. And while Giuliani did make that call, according to the Times, even Giuliani had his limits short of what Trump's were. Quote, Mr. Giuliani was vehemently opposed to the idea of the military taking part in the seizure of machines. Yeah, I think that sounds like a bad idea too. You see, some of the more conspiracy-addled allies in the coup plot had hatched a scheme by which the army would be the ones to, roll up to voting centers and round up the supposedly corrupt voting machines, which that would have been great optics. In other words, full authoritarian rule in which the military, in camo and their weapons go and grab voting machines. And the last bulwark of democracy was apparently Rudy Giuliani, of all people, at least in this one tiny little instance. It's a man who's not particularly known for his sound judgment these days. And that thought is absolutely terrifying. I should tell you, just within the past hour, the New York Times also reported that the committee investigating January 6th is looking into Trump's role in the proposal to seize those machines. We also got an interesting revelation from the Washington Post today that I think is also kind of evidence of corrupt intent, right? Of a sort of guilty mindset. And it's about a particular habit of Donald Trump's. We've known for years that Trump made a practice of hand shredding his documents, sometimes tearing them into tiny pieces of confetti. In fact, the government had employees on payroll who would spend their time taping Trump's documents back together. Because, you see, there is a such thing as a Presidential Records Act, and this legislation requires all letters and memos the president touches to be preserved. And I can tell you that people in other administrations take this very seriously. Very seriously. And yet, apparently, in flagrant and continued violation of that law, Trump would tear up his documents anyway, as if destroying any potential evidence was just second nature. Well, today we learned that some of Trump's documents related to the coup, the documents he sued all the way to the Supreme Court to block the January 6th committee from accessing, include papers that had been shredded and needed to be taped back together. Now, we do not know which specific documents were destroyed. That's not yet been made public, but as the Washington Post reports, quote, legal records indicate the documents over which Trump sought to assert privilege included presidential diaries, schedules, appointment information, handwritten notes concerning the events of January 6th from White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, speeches, remarks, and more. But the specifics here are not quite as important, I think, as just the general practice, right? Which speaks to the same thing that you can see in that instruction to Rudy Giuliani to call DHS. The corrupt intent that's inherent in Donald Trump's actions. He didn't want to make the call himself. He didn't want to leave a paper trail. As one staffer told Politico back in 2018, quote, he would rip up anything that happened to be on his desk that he was done with, even though he was told doing so was illegal. And it's worth keeping in mind when it comes to the attempted coup, there are almost no contested facts here, okay? Think about this. We know all these things. I mean, a lot of it happened out in the open. Rudy Giuliani went on TV to talk about the voting machines, as I just played you. There are multiple written memos from Trump allies outlining the attempted coup, the coup strategy. We could coup this way, we could coup that way. Trump himself just said what he wanted Pence to do was, and using the phrase, overturn the election. That's Trump's own phrase, okay? So at some level, we all agree on what happened. Trump's only remaining defense for his actions to drive a stake to the heart of American democracy is that he was so deluded, so fundamentally brain-addled, so out of touch with reality that he sincerely believed the utterly ludicrous, incoherent theory of injustice that the election was somehow stolen from him through this Byzantine, internally contradictory set of actors. And so he acted out of good faith to rectify this injustice that he truly believed in. But this evidence completely eviscerates that notion, which of course was never that plausible to begin with. If Trump really believed he was not doing anything wrong, why did he not call the Department of Homeland Security himself? Why is he ripping up the pieces of paper to hide the trail? I think the answer is pretty obvious. It's because he knew he was doing something wrong, and he wanted to keep his hands clean.
It is Wednesday, the 2nd of February of 2022, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Will no one rid us of these meddlesome priests? Oh my. Hey, and there's also happens to be a lovely egg dish with a velvety hollandaise sauce. So velvety. How are you doing this Wednesday morning? It's rather chilly here. Hasn't broken 30 degrees yet. We were down in the mid to low 20s overnight. So we did have a bit of rain Saturday night, Sunday morning. But now, I don't know. Are we going to get any more precipitation? I was reading a report that all of that snow bomb, and all that snow that went up into the mountains apparently is dry snow and doesn't have a bunch of water in it. What? So the drought continues, huh? Is that how they're going to treat us? How dare they? Well, it looks like Trump continues on his campaign to overthrow the United States of America and install him as titular head of said United States. I don't think we'll be so united. Oh, well, I just want to remind folks that there was one party that embraced a mobbed-up Russian asset. One party. We are reminded also of Maria Butina. She was in the Twitter sphere yesterday, trending at times. And, you know, the Russian spy who infiltrated the NRA and was a honeypot to scores of, GOP gentlemen on the cusp of being elderly. So we have one party who is willing to overthrow the United States of America for what? Jealousy and greed. And as Joni Mitchell said, that's the unraveling. So we have our work cut out for us, and you've heard me say that before. Yes, you have. And we do. It's the truth. We have our work cut out for us. What do we do? Do we give them the enabling acts? Well, you know, we don't want to give it to them, but they've worked very hard like little worker bees all these many decades to stack the courts. That's right. And we'll be talking about that court stacking cabal. Yeah, we'll be speaking about that later on in the show. But we have our work cut out for us. We just have to register more people to vote. Will the votes get counted? I don't know. I guess we just turn over all of the vote counting and all of that to the Nazis. What would happen? I just cannot. Would they be fair? I'm telling people, and you just don't want to trust a Nazi. You don't want to do that. You don't want to be put in a position to trust a Nazi. Remember that the prime directive is to, get rid of us. I just love how, when Trump first came to prominence as a presidential candidate, there was something in the works. I mean, you could see it. It was around Malheur, the takeover by the Bundys and other right-wing militia types up there in Malheur County. East of us, where I'm at in the mountains in Oregon, took over the wildlife refuge. Guy got killed, too. A guy that I like to call the bagman. Yeah, Finicum. He would give interviews in a garbage bag. I guess he thought he was John and Yoko. I don't know. Remember the bed-in? The bed for peace? And they would give interviews with sheets over their heads, a shroud. Yeah, Finicum would give interviews like that. And he ended up dead. Yeah, you don't draw down on cops. You don't speed away from cops, whoever you are. In that instance, I know they wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt, but guns, yeah, he fingered a gun. So during that time, there was an uptick in, trolling and bots. And it made me wonder, and it's so clear what was going on at the time. And it seemed rather foreign to me, and I made a few jokes about it. I didn't really want to believe it. But, all comedy is predicated upon a truth. And now we know. And it's even in the Mueller report. I don't know why it didn't raise to the level of a crime. I guess because it didn't have Antifa or Black Lives Matter attached to it as being the defendants. The perps. Because that's another thing. For decades and decades and decades, they promoted, fostered, nurtured a right-wing militant uprising. Here, have some guns. These Second Amendment rights protect all these other rights. No, they don't protect those other rights. They shoot those other rights in the back. Because that's what Nazis do. Enabling acts. Here, I have a Second Amendment right. I've got a gun. Oh, yeah, but you're supposed to be for hunting. Yeah, they're hunting liberals. Which reminds me, either Tom or Kelly had reported a fellow account on Twitter, purportedly to be from Israel, which I doubt very much. One follower, which tells you everything you need to know. But out there, just putting out the most vile BS, promoting violence and running over liberals and death to us. Out and out threats to kill people. Twitter said it didn't violate terms of service. I like how they give the form letter. I know it's not what you wanted to hear. Well, did you read the freaking thing, you AI? I got to tell you, I'm smarter than an AI. We all are. I make better playlists than Spotify. I make better playlists than Google. I make better playlists than Pandora. I do. Because I'm a human being with a heart and a soul, as far as we know. Can we measure the soul? I don't know. It's an idea. All right. Immeasurable. Our souls are immeasurable. But we have it. And I got to tell you, machines don't. Some might purport that we are machines, so therefore, how is that possible that we have a soul? I know. We are self-actualizing. I understand that machines are very close to becoming self-actualizing themselves too, but they will not have heart, and they will not have soul. In other words, they'll be just like the GOP Nazis that are trying to take over the United States of America and the rest of the world. Talk about a new world order. They always project. They always claim they're against what they are fighting for. Oh, we don't want a new world order. Yeah, you don't want empathy in the world because it might stop your goose-stepping all over us. It might. So, what do we do about this? We're getting in big trouble in just by Dana the fact that, once again, our own laws and rules and customs, behaviors are being used against us. They have been weaponized against us. Yeah. Oh, we want comedy. We want bipartisanship. Here's Joe also talking about he's got to get some Republicans on side for these SCOTUS picks. Are you effing serious? Is that going to happen? Is it? When you have a whole party who, I don't know, $100 million into Mark Meadows' campaign or PAC, right when he's being investigated and asked questions by January 6th. You have a whole party of Mark Meadows either bought off or Russian Komoprot has put them to heel. Yep. So we want to have comity with that. You don't negotiate with Nazis, you punch them. And I'm still curious on how come somebody can say they can run over liberals, shoot them, and do any other number of things. We're all commies. We're the real Nazis. How Jack? Is Jack still part of Twitter? I don't know. But how is it that something like that can stay out there just spouting off this hate, these threats of violence? Because we have a former president of the United States going up on a public forum, a stage, and threatening the lives of judges, prosecutors, and just elderly voting poll workers for voting day. Personally, puts their names out there so they can be, well, go through some things. Alexander Vindman filed a lawsuit against Trump for violating his civil rights, intimidation, retaliation for his, subpoenaed testimony that he responded truthfully for. And Trump and his cronies retaliated against him and his brother, by the way, who wasn't part of this construct, but they were brothers, and they had risen through the ranks, and they're both out of the military. But Mike Flynn's brother's still there. You know, the one that said, nah, we're not going to bring in the National Guard. There was some argument. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that it was Mike Flynn's brother that made this decision. But there was some thought that maybe we don't bring in the National Guard because they might join the insurrection. And other military units that were conveniently quartered nearby. But help was not coming to the cops, the D.C. and Capitol cops being pummeled by thousands, 10,000 or more outside the Capitol, over 1,000 inside. Hang Mike Pence. Vindman sued Donald Trump. Good for him. Let's hope it goes somewhere. Well, what's on the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy as we start off on this fine Smothered Benedict Wednesdays? Well, yes, at the top, why did Trump rip up pieces of paper to hide the trail? It's because he knew he was doing something wrong, and he wanted to keep his hands clean. Oh, yeah. Violating the Presidential Records Act is against the law. Ripping up paper, just like a mobster. On the rest of the menu, the right-wing court-stacking cabal, the Federalist Society, has barred the media from a talk by Justice Gorsuch at his annual banquet in Florida. Trump's relentless false claims about the 2020 presidential election has spurred Congress to bolster the electoral count law, and calling the league rife with racism, fired Miami Dolphins coach Brian Flores sued the NFL and 3 teams over racist hiring practices for coaches and general managers. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where the Israeli National Police found evidence of improper use of sophisticated spyware by its own investigators to snoop on Israeli citizens. And a Norwegian court rejected neo-Nazi mass killer Breivik's parole request. There is a God in high heaven after all. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly, for doing so. If you would look across the page to the left near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, there is the link to our Patreon page. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio how about if you could afford possibly the cost of what you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink, if you could send those funds our way once a month, it helps us pay our bills and all the other accoutrements acquired or required to run this powerhouse of resistance. It helps us pay our bills, and we fly under the radar and continue this resistance against dark forces arrayed against the United States, America, and representative democracy itself. And I'm not kidding. Anyway, thank you for your generosity, for those of you who have done so for these almost 11 years now of continuous 24/7, 365 resistance broadcasting. And thank you to those of you who will consider doing so in the future because, well, I got to tell you, we need it. We really do. And thank you for helping us out. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, you can do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that. Thank you, Tom. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. Incidentally, I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Kos about 10 minutes before showtime. The show notes and links are very important because that's where the real reportage is, and that gets put up on Twitter and other social media platforms, so check it out. After all, that is where the real reportage is. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, and please do pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. And also a reminder that the deep archive of years and years of Netroots Radio shows can be found at the Internet Archive. Links provided. I got to get Tom to put up a link for the Internet Archive, the Deep Archive, on our homepage. We'll do that real soon. All right. Let us now tuck into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And it is by Mark Sherman out of the Associated Press. Justice Neil Gorsuch is speaking this weekend to the conservative legal group that boosted his Supreme Court candidacy in a session at a Florida resort that is closed to news coverage. Gorsuch is billed as the banquet speaker this coming Friday at the Florida chapter of the Federalist Society's annual meeting, which is being held at the Walt Disney World Resort in Lake Buena Vista. Do they call it Buena there? It's Buena. The schedule on the organization's website notes, the banquet is closed to the press, as they click their heels and give a stiff arm salute. Neither the Federalist Society nor the Supreme Court immediately offered any explanation because they don't need to. They're Nazis. They do what they want. The two-day meeting also will feature former Vice President Hang Mike Pence, and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis because, hey, it's Florida, as well as a session billed the end of Roe v. Wade. Yeah, they click their heels and give the stiff arm salute. And that will be moderated by a federal judge appointed by, you guessed it, Donald Trump. The High Court is weighing a major rollback of abortion rights and could overrule the 1973 Roe decision because they don't give an F about precedent. Why? I told you. Starts with an N and ends with Otzi. Or Etsy. Now, the Federalist Society typically allows reporters to cover its meetings. That was the case in 2017 when Gorsuch addressed more than 2,000 people at a black-tie dinner at Washington's Union Station 7 months after he joined the Supreme Court. Remember just a few weeks ago he was whining that everybody's saying we're political. You're just a bunch of commie liberals. Or was that Alito? They're all the same, at least on that 6 of the 3 side. Gorsuch's ascension to the nation's highest court owes at least, in part, to his inclusion on a list of possible nominees that the Federalist Society compiled and that Trump issued during his 2016 campaign for the presidency. Remember when he said he's only going to elect judges that will overthrow or overrule Roe v. Wade? And now the right wing is just a Twitter. Yeah, no pun intended. Over Joe promising to nominate a black woman to this court. Okay. They don't care. They're Nazis. They don't care about how it looks. They don't care about decorum. They're Nazis. Shortly after taking office, Trump nominated Gorsuch for the seat left vacant by the mysterious death of Justice Antonin Scalia in February of 2016. Yeah, there's some people that think that pillow that fell on him might have been forced down with some force. Some people think that. Republicans who control the Senate refuse to confirm former President Barack Obama's nominee, Merrick Garland. And with DeSantis and Gorsuch on the schedule, the meeting features 2 prominent public figures who have made a point of not wearing masks during the coronavirus pandemic. At High Court arguments in January, Gorsuch was the only justice who did not wear a mask on the bench. His seatmate, Justice Sonia Sotomayor, has had diabetes since childhood and did not attend arguments in person, although she did not ascribe her absence to Gorsuch's decision. Yet, on Disney's website, it says, face coverings are required for all guests ages 2 and up in all indoor locations, regardless of vaccination status. Offering here in the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays, is by Lisa Mascaro and Farnoosh Amiri, also from the Associated Press. Donald Trump's relentless false claims about the 2020 presidential election have sparked fresh urgency in Congress and in both parties for changing the Electoral Count Act to ensure no one can undo a future presidential election. Lawmakers are working furiously to update the 135-year-old law that was put in place in the aftermath of the Civil War and came perilously close to unraveling on January 6, 2021. At that time, the defeated president urged his followers to fight like hell over the election and pressured Vice President Mike Pence to ditch his ceremonial role presiding over the session and reject the results. While Pence ignored the president's demands that day, Trump continues to insist the vice president could have overturned the election, a deeply troubling development as the former president considers another White House run. I think it's time to invoke the 14th Amendment. If you've taken part in an insurrection against the United States, which is what this clearly is, you cannot run for office, hold office, and as far as I'm concerned, you ought to take up residence with Seagal in Gorky Park. Get out of here. Back to the article at hand. President Trump's comments underscored the need for us to revise the Electoral Count Act because they demonstrated the confusion in the law and the fact that it is ambiguous. Senator Susan Collins, Vichy Repug of Maine, said, yeah, I don't ever trust anything this lady says, okay? She's Lucy. She always pulls a Lucy. The outcome of the bipartisan effort in Congress remains highly fluid and could easily collapse, especially as Republicans are wary of crossing Trump and Democrats seek broader changes after their own sweeping elections and voting legislation fell apart last month. Yeah, you got a bunch of corporate Nazis with a bunch of corporate Nazi money buying off Mansion and Cinema. And I got to tell you, the whole of the GOP, let's not forget about them. Any update to the 19th century law would likely face the filibuster's 60 vote threshold in the Senate, meaning the legislation would need bipartisan support in the evenly split chamber to advance, which means it doesn't have a chance in hell. Yet the effort to change the electoral count has been gaining political currency, especially with Trump edging toward another run. Once again, the 14th Amendment precludes anybody taking part in a seditious act to overthrow the United States of America. It's only been on the books since the effing Civil War. Use it. Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell said on Tuesday yesterday he's open to the effort as he also rejected the idea Trump floated at the weekend rally of pardoning people who have been criminally charged in the deadly riot at the Capitol. What we saw here on January 6th was an effort to prevent the peaceful transfer of power from one administration to another, Turtle McConnell said. The Kentucky Republican went on to say the Electoral Count Act is flawed and it needs to be fixed. He also said those charged criminally in the riot, I would not be in favor of shortening any of the sentences of any of the people who pleaded guilty. Well, that's something nice to hear from Moscow Mitch. A bipartisan group led by Susan Collins, the rare and frequent Republican Trump critic, oh, give me a break, has been meeting behind closed doors and hopes to present a draft as soon as this week. Senators are delving into potential changes to the Electoral Count Act with ideas that would make it more difficult to challenge the results. They are also considering ways to protect election workers. That's a first, isn't it? Who are being harassed at alarming rates nationwide and funding for election assistance and voting equipment. Some 16 senators, Republicans and Democrats, are working swiftly with the blessing of party leaders, much the way they did last year to produce the $1 trillion bipartisan infrastructure bill President Joe Biden signed into law. Civil rights and voting rights advocacy groups are pushing Democrats to broaden their scope and include some elements of the failed voting legislation, particularly the John R. Lewis Voting Advancement Act, which would reinstate the Justice Department's role in monitoring elections in states with repeated violations of voting laws. the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Fired Miami Dolphins coach Brian Flores sued the NFL and 3 teams yesterday, Tuesday, over alleged, I guess we have to say that since it is the AP, alleged racist hiring practices for coaches and general managers, saying the league remains rife with racism even as it publicly condemns it. The lawsuit, filed in Manhattan federal court, said the hypocrisy was on display with the chilly treatment Flores received from the Dolphins after he refused to accept a $100,000 a game offer from the club his first season to tank so it could secure the top draft pick. We've seen those movies before. The lawsuit sought class action status and unspecified damages from the league, the Dolphins, the Denver Broncos, and the New York Giants, along with unidentified individuals. Flores, age 40, was fired last month by Miami after leading the Dolphins to a 24-25 record over 3 years. They went 9-8 in their second straight winning season, but failed to make the playoffs during his tenure. In a statement released by the lawyers representing him, Flores said, "God has gifted me with a special talent to coach the game of football, but the need for change is bigger than my personal goals. In making the decision to file the class action complaint today, I understand that I may be risking coaching the game that I love and that has done so much for my family and me. My sincere hope is that by standing up against systemic racism in the NFL, others will join me to ensure that positive change is made for generations to come," he said. In a statement, the NFL said it will defend against these claims, which are without merit. Oh, really? It added, "The NFL and our clubs are deeply committed to ensuring equitable employment practices and continue to make progress in providing equitable opportunities throughout our organizations. Diversity is core to everything we do, and there are few issues on which our clubs and our internal leadership teams spend more time on." Oh, really? The lawsuit alleges that the league is discriminated against Flores and other black coaches for racial reasons, denying them positions as head coaches, offensive and defensive coordinators, and quarterback coaches, as well as general managers. According to the lawsuit, Miami Dolphins owner Stephen Ross told Flores he would pay him $100,000 for every loss the coach's first season because he wanted the club to tank so he could get the draft's top pick. The lawsuit alleged that Ross then pressured Flores to recruit a prominent quarterback in violation of the league's tampering rules. When Flores refused, he was cast as the angry black man who was difficult to work with and was derided until he was fired, the suit said. The lawsuit said the firing of Flores was typical for black coaches who were not given the latitude other coaches received to succeed. It noted that Flores led the Dolphins to back-to-back winning seasons for the first time since 2003. And last week, the Giants disclosed to third parties they had decided to hire Brian Daboll as their new coach, even when they had not yet had their scheduled meeting with Flores, the lawsuit said. Mr. Flores was deceptively led to believe he actually had a chance at this job, the lawsuit said, adding that he had to endure a dinner with Giants' new general manager, knowing that the team had already selected Daboll. The lawsuit also cited a message Flores received 3 days after his scheduled Giants interview from New England Patriots coach Bill Belichick, which at first told Flores he'd heard that Flores was their guy. But the lawsuit, Belichick apologized and corrected himself, saying he'd misread the text and now realized Daboll was chosen. A message left for the Patriots was not immediately returned. The lawsuit also claimed Flores was forced to undergo a sham interview with the Broncos in 2019 when then Broncos general manager John Elway, President Joe Ellis, and others showed up an hour late for his interview. They looked completely disheveled, and it was obvious they had been drinking heavily the night before, the lawsuit said. It was clear from the substance of the interviews that Mr. Flores was interviewed only because of the Rooney Rule. In a statement, the Broncos said the allegations were blatantly false. According to the lawsuit, Flores' treatment by the Giants and Broncos was typical of how the Rooney Rule has been administered for the last 2 decades. The rule, named after former Pittsburgh Steelers owner Dan Rooney while he was chairman of the NFL's Diversity Committee, was created to give more minority candidates opportunities to become a head coach and reward teams who develop them. In 2020, the NFL amended the Rooney Rule to stipulate teams must interview at least 2 minority candidates not associated with their team for a head coaching vacancy. Also, 1 minority candidate has to be interviewed for coordinator positions as well as high-ranking positions in the front office, including the general manager role. Well, let's get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. This week, postmodern and time-tested. The metaverse, as envisioned by certain corporate executives, might not be here yet, but it surely arrived in the new movie Belle, available in theaters in English or recommended in the original Japanese with subtitles. In the latest effort from Mamoru Hosoda, this animated tale follows Suzu, a shy 17-year-old from a rural village in Japan whose life had been marred as a young child by a traumatic event which had ruined her former joy in music and singing. Shy and unconfident, but close to her friends, she signs into something called You, a virtual universe where she can transcend her past and, as a reimagined sumptuous pop star, ends up playing to audiences of hundreds of millions as Belle. Unlike in the real world, as she points out, you can start over in You. All's well until a dragon shows up, ruining one of her shows. The dragon has enemies, as they do, and the second act becomes sort of a spectacular animated retelling of The Beauty and the Beast. Like Belle, the dragon is an avatar for a real-world character, Kai, who along with his brother Tomo are the victims of some pretty severe child abuse. For Suzu to convince the brothers that she really is Belle, she must perform in You as Suzu, which she does, securing a satisfactory ending and sealing the movie's place in the coming-of-age category. The message in Belle may be less profound every day, that the virtual world can be just another means of hiding our vulnerabilities, and that being seen for who we really are remains an act of courage. But it's beautifully and touchingly done. Note it'll be more memorable if you catch it on the big screen. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. Catch up with us at take2moviereview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
You are listening to 60 Second Civics from the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. Thomas Jefferson wrote the first draft of the Declaration of Independence. It announced the final momentous step in the colonists' resistance to the British government by rejecting the sovereignty or authority of the Crown. Rebelling against the sovereignty of the government to which the colonists and generations of their forebears had sworn allegiance and from which they had sought protection for many years was a serious matter. Members of the Continental Congress believed that it was important to justify this action to other nations and to identify the basic principles of legitimate government to win sympathy and active support. Thus, a formal declaration was seen as essential. The Declaration is a prime example of the colonists' ideas about government and their complaints about British rule. It does not make an appeal on behalf of the king's loyal subjects to the fundamental rights of Englishmen. Instead, the Declaration renounces the monarchy itself and appeals to those natural rights common to people everywhere. It asserts that sovereignty, the ultimate governing authority, resides with the people, with those who are members of a politically organized community. That's all for today's episode, 60 Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1929, and 3,000 workers in New South Wales, Australia were locked out of their jobs. Australia was in the midst of the Great Depression. A judge had ruled that the timber industry could increase the work week from 44 hours to 48, while simultaneously lowering the workers' wages. Standing firm in opposition, the workers refused to comply with the mandatory 4-hour increase in work without pay. The company responded by charging in the courts that the workers had gone on strike. This invoked penalties under the 1928 Arbitration Amendment Act. During the strike, women played an important role, holding weekly meetings and gathering food donations from throughout Sydney for the families impacted by the lockout. Women delivered speeches in support of the strikers, harassed scab workers, and held fundraisers to support the cause. Trade unions in the city also supported the strike, holding a rally of 25,000 workers in March. Then, the same judge who had decided on the increase in hours ordered the union to hold a secret ballot vote on the issue of the strike. This marked the first time a secret ballot vote over a strike had occurred in Australia. In a protest demonstration, 3,000 timber workers burned their ballots in defiance. They also burned an effigy of the judge. When the secret vote finally occurred, management's proposals were roundly defeated by a margin of more than 5-1. In the end, however, it was a losing battle. The ravages of the Great Depression were too much to overcome. After more than 8 weeks on strike, the workers returned to the 48-hour workweek. Leaders of the strike faced criminal charges of unlawful conspiracy by violence and threats of violence, but were eventually acquitted by a jury. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States, where it is currently 29 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high in the upper 40s, mostly cloudy, with gusts of wind, being light and variable, but we'll have gusts about 5 miles per hour at some point during the day. Since we've been burning up time, we're going to go straight to weather from around the world, which is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 53 and partly cloudy. Paris is 51 and cloudy. Rome is 59 degrees and fair. Kyiv is 32 and mostly cloudy. Kabul is 30 degrees and also mostly cloudy. Hong Kong is 53 and just merely cloudy. Tokyo is 40 degrees and clear. Sydney, Australia is 66 and cloudy. San Francisco, California is 55 degrees and sunny. And New York, New York is 40 degrees Fahrenheit and cloudy. and that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Elon Ben-Zion of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Israel's national police said it had found evidence pointing to improper use of sophisticated spyware by its own investigators to snoop on Israeli citizens' telephones. The announcement came 2 weeks after an Israeli newspaper reported a string of instances of the police using the NSO group's Pegasus software to surveil protesters, politicians, and criminal suspects without authorization from a judge. The report caused outrage in Israel and prompted the Attorney General and lawmakers to launch investigations. Last month, police had a preliminary internal investigation and found no evidence of misuse of the controversial spyware, but yesterday, Tuesday, the police said a secondary inspection found additional evidence that changes certain aspects of the state of the affairs. The statement made no mention of NSO, indicating that surveillance products developed by other Israeli firms might be under scrutiny. The company had no comment.
Je te donne, c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mais automne, quand les feuilles tombent partout, si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Jan M. Olson of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A Norwegian court ruled yesterday, Tuesday, that far-right extremist Anders Breivik, who killed 77 people in 2011, must remain in prison, saying there remains an obvious risk he could return to behavior that led up to the massacre. I guess coming in with a Nazi salute might have been a clue. Last month, Breivik faced a parole hearing before the three-judge Telemark District Court, where he professed white supremacist views and flashed Nazi salutes on the hearing's opening day while claiming to have renounced violence. But the court said he remains a potential threat. The ruling said he used extreme violence as a tool to achieve his own political goals, and the court has no doubt that Breivik still today has the ability to commit new serious crimes that may expose others to danger. Breivik is serving Norway's maximum 21-year sentence for setting off a bomb in Oslo's government district and carrying out a shooting massacre at a summer camp for left-wing youth activists. He was declared sane at his trial, although the prosecution argued that he was psychotic. He did not appeal a sentence, but unsuccessfully sued the government for human rights violations by denying him the right to communicate with neo-Nazi sympathizers. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin l'âge tombe, nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin l'âge tendre, nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.